Live from London, this is BBC News. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make a last-ditch pitch to voters in a presidential race that is too close to call. We'll bring you the latest from our correspondents in Washington, North Carolina, Wisconsin and Georgia. Our other headlines: a red alert is issued for torrential rain in Barcelona. Dozens of flights from the city's main airport have been affected due to floodwaters. And the music legend Quincy Jones, one of the pivotal figures in pop music, has died at the age of 91. Hello and welcome to Verified Live. As campaigning for the US presidential election enters its final day, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have been attempting to drive home their messages in the swing states, which will decide the result. The election tomorrow is expected to be the closest in US history. More than 77 million Americans have already cast their votes in early ballots. Well, all day today, we're hearing from our correspondents across the 7 battleground or swing states. In a moment, I'll be speaking to our teams in North Carolina, Wisconsin and Georgia. First, though, Anna Foster joins me live from Washington. And Anna, a frantic last day of campaigning. And if you look at where the candidates are going, that is where is critically important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Matthew. And if you don't know US politics well, it might seem strange to see how much of that energy and time that their families, their running mates, everybody focuses on those key swing states. And I think where you see where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are today, there's a lot of focus on Pennsylvania, of course, which is the biggest of the swing states in terms of electoral college votes, 19 of them up for grabs there. They are both in Pennsylvania today, in these various 7 states around the country. And I think when you see, as you said, the fact that they are really working until the very last minute, the polls here, and of course we know that polls can tell all kinds of stories, and certainly the polls here are within a margin of error, but they show that the 2 candidates are incredibly finely balanced. And I think that momentum, that energy is really being felt by both sides. They're both taking that as a positive right now. They both think that they are within touching distance of the presidency. And that's why they're really pushing so hard with the campaigning, getting those messages out right until the very last moment. Our correspondent Jessica Parker has the latest on that.
The closing stages of this presidential race, as the 2 people aiming to take charge of the world's largest economy seek momentum and votes. Donald Trump used rallies to hammer home his message.
I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of massive numbers of criminals coming into our country. Thank you very much, Kamala and Joe.
But his campaign had to clarify remarks about bulletproof glass, saying they weren't to do with harming the media.
And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much.
Kamala Harris has claimed her opponent is increasingly unstable, but at this rally she avoided saying Donald Trump's name.
America is ready for a fresh start, ready for a new way forward, where we see our fellow American not as an enemy, but as a neighbor.
We thank you for how you have lifted her up.
Both candidates have been focusing their energies on 7 key swing states, which could decide this election. In Michigan, Harris supporters queued up, eager to usher their candidate into power.
I think people are changing their mindsets, which is really good. A lot of Trump supporters are now not necessarily becoming Democrats, but understanding that she is the one who's going to help us become a better economy and a better place in general.
While in Georgia, Trump backers were beating the drum for his return to the White House.
I mean, our economy was better when Trump was in office. Everything was better. But I want our open borders, biggest mistake ever.
More than 74 million Americans have already made use of early voting ahead of Tuesday, Election Day. This presidential race, that's watched for its impact all over the world, is now approaching its endgame. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Washington, D.C.
And you know, Matthew, there's a small detail that you might have heard in there, and it shows you how fractious and really unpleasant this campaign has been in many ways. Kamala Harris is no longer using Donald Trump's name at rallies, as you heard there. She's decided not to end the campaign on a positive. But when you heard him mention her name, he still doesn't pronounce it the way that she spent a lot of time telling people how it should be pronounced. He still calls her Kamala Harris, even at this stage of proceedings.
Yes, which appears quite deliberate. In terms of Donald Trump, he is increasingly talking about electoral fraud in Pennsylvania. What should we make of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matthew. So Pennsylvania, as we were saying, in terms of electoral college votes, is the biggest, 19 up for grabs there. So it really is the golden prize of these swing states for both candidates. Pennsylvania is also interesting in that when we talk about those pre-ballots, and you said right at the beginning, Matthew, more than 76 million Americans have already voted. In the state of Pennsylvania, those pre-ballots do not get counted in advance. They don't start counting them until the polls open, so 7 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow morning. And that means that Pennsylvania is often a slightly slower state when it comes to actually producing a result, because they have all that work to do right at the beginning. And you've also heard, as you said there, Donald Trump sort of suggesting electoral fraud is at play, suggesting there might be some kind of problem. Now, officials in Pennsylvania are very keen to point out that they are all over this. They're making sure that everything is being done above board, but that it might take time. And I know that there are concerns, particularly among Democrats, that the Republican campaign on Donald Trump is sort of trying to sow early seeds, if this is a close result, again, to look at things legally, to try and challenge the results. Remember, Donald Trump never actually fully conceded to losing the 2020 election. He never came out and said publicly that he did. And I think people are seeing now, perhaps in those messages that are coming out, without evidence, it's important to say, no evidence of electoral fraud in Pennsylvania or anywhere else at this stage, but they see it as potentially this pitch rolling for when those results start to come in, and how that might be received by both campaigns.
Anna Foster there in Washington, thanks very much. Let's get out to those battleground states. Helena Humphrey is in North Carolina for us, Carl Nasman is in Wisconsin, and John Sudworth is in Georgia. Helena, let's start with you, because both candidates heading your way to North Carolina today. 4 out of the last 10 Donald Trump events have been in North Carolina. Just how close is it likely to be?
I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it? I think wherever the candidates go in this final stretch, this breathless last dash across the country shows you potentially where they might even have some anxiety for the Trump campaign. He will be holding his 5th rally in so many days here in this state. Kamala Harris now saying that she won't be heading to Raleigh, but instead will be focusing solely on Pennsylvania instead. But in terms of how close it will be here, it's going to be a toss-up, essentially, in this state. This was the only swing state that President Biden failed to capture in 2020. Very close then, losing it by just a single percentage point. So for the Democrats right now, this is a fight to flip this state blue. The last time they managed to do so, of course, Barack Obama in 2008, riding that message of optimism and hope, the kind of message that Kamala Harris was intent on putting out once again in her rallies last night. Talking about some of the key groups, though, that will be important here. There are a number of them, and those groups that I will be watching, suburban women voters. We've been talking about that across the country. What's interesting here in North Carolina is when you get away from urban centres like Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, for example, you start to go into rural areas very quickly. You do see it starts to become more conservative. But I've been in those rural areas. I've been speaking to women there. And certainly there has been that concern over reproductive rights. There have been targeted ads in this state, particularly calling on Christian women, for example, saying the ballot box, the booth there, is private. What you do there, you do not have to communicate with your partner, your family, and so on. Then there is also this question of African-American voters, a significant part of the population here in Greensboro, where I am right now. I'm currently on a campus at a historically Black College. What kind of level will we see in terms of mobilization, turnout in a race where every vote here will matter? And then, of course, Hurricane Helene. Of course, you'll remember it, Matthew, those devastating images over a month ago here in this state. It doesn't appear to have affected turnout in early voting, but there is this question of perception and the reaction to the disaster relief from the incumbent Biden administration. Will that impact how people feel about a potential continuation of a Democratic administration? So just some of the factors at play here to see whether this swing state does flip blue.
Helena, as you're speaking, we're looking at pictures of the latest Donald Trump rally. It is there in North Carolina. It will start in the next little while, so we'll dip into that just as soon as it does begin. In terms of the ground games from both the Democrats and Republicans, take me through what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's right. I was actually speaking to a chair of a county Democratic chapter here in North Carolina. He was saying that he believes that this is the strongest ground game that he has seen since 2008 in terms of that network of volunteers going around, mobilizing voters, knocking on doors. And I can also tell you from the Republican side as well, in the wake of Hurricane Helene, there was a great deal of concern about voter turnout. We saw a number of Republican groups as well in the western part of the state going to affected areas, saying to people, if you can't get out to vote, we can bus you down mountains, for example, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. There have been pop-up ballot stations, for example, voting booths for some people in those particularly affected areas, because ultimately this does come down to the ground game when things are so tight, as you point out. And Donald Trump continuing that ground game today in Raleigh. We'll have to see the numbers of people who come out as well. That will be something to watch, but very much the case that that ground game certainly does matter.
Helena, thanks very much for now. Let's go to Carl Nasman. He's in Wisconsin for us. And Carl, just give me a sense of what you're seeing, what you're hearing.
Well, both campaigns are going to be delivering their final messages to voters today here in Wisconsin as well. We're expecting actually both running mates to be here, J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz. Mr. Walz will be here in Milwaukee later today. We've seen this flurry of activity recently in the state. Many of the campaigns, both candidates making stops here. Donald Trump holding a massive rally in Milwaukee a couple of days ago. That's because both campaigns do see Wisconsin as a very important state for them, 10 electoral votes. Part of this blue wall that Kamala Harris is hoping to take on election night. I'm joined, though, by a special guest. The mayor of Milwaukee is with me, Mayor Cavalier Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Your city has really been one of the central parts of this campaign here in the Midwest. What have you made of the messages from those campaigns, and which one do you think is resonating most with voters here?
Milwaukee has been the center of the political universe this entire campaign cycle. And when I go out and talk to folks in my city, whether I'm at their doors or I see them at work or I just encounter them on the streets or in the grocery store, folks here understand the stakes of this election. They understand that there's a choice between these two candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. One has a vision for a new way forward that lifts everybody up, and one has a desire to have an enemies list that he'll stew over and take his powers as president to hurt the folks who he feels have wronged them. So it's not really a question, I think, in the eyes of many Milwaukeeans I've talked to about who they're going to be supporting in this race for president.
There has been a surge in early voting, obviously, in the state of Wisconsin, but Milwaukee itself has been a little bit behind, about 7% behind the rest of the state. This has a large concentration, the most diverse city, really, in terms of African-American voters, Latino voters. Should that be concerning at all for Democrats?
Well, look, Democrats have made incredible investments in Milwaukee. For the first time in roughly 20 years, the statewide party's office for an election of this magnitude is located here in the city of Milwaukee, not out in Madison. And that's for a purpose, is because Democrats want to reach out to diverse voters here in the city. And as you mentioned, this is the most diverse community in the entire state of Wisconsin. There are 40 plus offices. The party has opened up all over the state of Wisconsin, a number of those here in the city of Milwaukee. Democrats have engaged in relational organizing to get folks who can vote, who should vote, but don't vote, out to the polls and engage in our political process now. And over the course of early voting in Milwaukee, which just concluded just yesterday, we've had had over 100,000 people, over 105,000 people actually, who voted early some way, somehow, whether that's early by mail or early in person. So I feel really, really enthused, and we still have Election Day tomorrow for folks to get out and vote in Milwaukee.
Let's talk about those early votes. Milwaukee is the largest city, obviously, in the state. There's going to be a lot of votes here to be counted. We're already hearing from some of your election officials that could take some time. We could not get results maybe till 2 or 3 in the morning here. What's your message then for people that might be concerned if they're watching television and there's no results going on many hours, maybe even into the next day after Election Day?
Sure, and I can answer that. My response would be, don't be concerned. We have so many dedicated volunteers, folks who work in our Elections Commission who are doing a phenomenal job working to make sure we have a transparent, free, and fair election. But you're right, it will take time. It will take time to count over 100,000 ballots that came in early. And look, today is the day before Election Day. I would have loved to be in a position where we would have been able to count those ballots early, starting today. And we had a bill. It was a bipartisan bill. I, as a Democrat, supported it. The Speaker of our state assembly, Robin Vos, a Republican, supported it. Other Republicans have supported it as well. Unfortunately, it didn't pass in the state Senate, providing it to our governor to sign into law. So we would have liked to be in a position where we could have counted those ballots early. Unfortunately, we have to follow Wisconsin state law that says that those 100,000 plus ballots have to just sit there until Election Day tomorrow.
And Mayor, briefly, what role do you think Wisconsin will play tomorrow?
The critical role. Whoever wins Wisconsin wins the White House.
All right, Mayor Cavalier Johnson, it's also your birthday tomorrow, so happy early birthday to you on Election Day. Wisconsin going to be one of those close states we will be watching potentially late into the night for those results.
Carl, thanks so much. You can see the pictures there on your screen. Let me just explain what that is. Those are pictures live from Detroit because the early counting of the ballots already in. We know across the country 77 million people already have voted. Each state counts at different stages. Well, those early voting and the early counting is already underway there in Detroit. Well, let's go live now to Georgia. Our correspondent John Sudworth is there. And John, in terms of the state where you are, how close is it in Georgia and what are the big issues that are at play?
Well, Matthew, you know, the whole thing comes down to states like Georgia. We know that in well over 40 or more American states, the outcome is a foregone conclusion, but it's in places like this that the road to the White House runs right through because it is simply too close to call. Polls show that it is on a knife edge. You'll remember back in 2020, you know, this state was decided by just a few thousand votes in favor of Joe Biden. Back then, there was the infamous telephone call from Donald Trump after the election in the early days of January 2021 when he tried to pressure officials here to find him the 11,000 votes that he had lost by. And the opinion polls suggest we could well be in a similar situation again. Just a few thousand undecided voters could determine the outcome here. And that's why, again, as we've been hearing from my colleagues across America, this is one of those places that the candidates have been visiting and revisiting, both holding back-to-back rallies over the past couple of days. I saw Donald Trump speaking in the city of Macon last night, a couple of hours or so south of Atlanta, where I am now. Kamala Harris here in Atlanta on Saturday, both of them appealing to their supporters. Obviously, at those rallies, you get the base, you get the you know, the sort of real core support. But the message to that support is go out and find those undecided voters, those neighbours, those friends who may not yet have made up their minds, and get them down to the polling station. One interesting thing, I think, across the national picture, Matthew, which is worth pointing out, is neither candidate is particularly popular. That's been something we've seen over previous electoral cycles in recent years, both of their popularity ratings below 50%. So this is really a last-ditch grind of an effort to try to reach all of those voters, particularly ones who may not see anything attractive about either of them, and just get them to the polls.
John Sudworth, live there in Georgia. Thanks very much. We'll get much more from all of our correspondents there on the ground throughout the course of our programme today, but that gives you just a flavour, a snapshot of what is happening in this last day of campaigning. We'll be looking at the polls more in depth here on the programme in just a moment or two. Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News. You're watching BBC News. Let's return, as promised, to the US elections. We're in the last day of campaigning. We've been out on the ground in the various battleground states. As we head into tomorrow, let's just take a closer look of how the election actually plays out, because millions of Americans heading to the polls tomorrow. Not only will they be casting their vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, but they'll also be voting for members of Congress who play a key part in passing laws. And these votes can sway the outcome as to who becomes president. That's because the US uses a unique system called the Electoral College, meaning the winner is not the person who gets the most votes across the country. Instead, both candidates compete to win contests held across the 50 states. Each state has a certain number of Electoral College votes. There are a total of 538 up for grabs, and the winner is the candidate that wins 270 or more. All but 2 states have a winner-takes-all rule, so whichever candidate wins the highest number of votes is awarded all of the state's Electoral College votes. Most states lean heavily towards one party or other, so the focus is usually on the handful of battleground or swing states where either of them could win. It is possible for a candidate to win the popular vote, like Hillary Clinton did back in 2016, but still be defeated by the Electoral College, which led to Donald Trump's win. Well, the polls are still incredibly tight. Let's have a quick look at the national polls. We had a flurry of polls over the weekend, each with their own slightly different take on the figures. And if you draw out the overall trends rather than the individual points, you see the Vice President Kamala Harris just 1 point ahead in those national polls. Well, how are the polls looking in the crucial battleground states that we've been discussing? With me here in the studios, Robert Cuff from BBC Verify, our head of statistics. Robert, welcome here to the programme. So you've been looking at those swing states. What is happening?
It is very tight. And if we show the polls in those battleground states that you mentioned to the audience, you can see that the gaps are pretty narrow between them. Trump looks to be ahead in about 5, I think. Harris ahead in 2. And if those turn out to be the results, then Donald Trump would win the presidency. You can see that there on the screen, 5 leaning red towards Republican and 2 left to Harris. But those gaps are really, really narrow. Donald Trump only has a lead of about, 3 points, I think, only in Arizona. And 3 is an important number because you can expect a lot of these polls to be out by that much on election night. And I could easily take any of those dots on the screen there. If I shifted any of Kamala Harris's ones off to the right by 3 points, Donald Trump gets a landslide, takes them all. Whereas if I were to shift any of Donald Trump's polls down by 3 points towards Harris, she wins the Electoral College and goes romping home. So with 24 hours to go.
Yes, all of those within the margin of error. Now, one poll has had a lot of attention, a lot of excitement through the course of the weekend because it's from a non-swing state, and that was Iowa. Tell us about that.
I know it's ordinarily a very safe Republican seat, and a very reputable pollster there has put Kamala Harris ahead by 3 points with only a few days to go. Now, Iowa is a state which went +8 points for Donald Trump last time around, and even more in 2016. It's got 2 Republican senators, 4 Republican congressmen. It's a pretty safe Republican bet. And Ann Seltzer, the pollster that you mentioned, she's found leads for Donald Trump there in the past, in 2016 against the head for Hillary Clinton, even earlier in this campaign. Huge leads for Donald Trump over Joe Biden, shrinking a bit in September, and now in this latest poll, it's put him 3 points ahead, which is a huge swing. It's only one poll, but it's news.
Really quickly, why is that poll so different?
Well, the swing is big, but what's really interesting is that she is likely picking up a big change in the turnout that we're going to see that other pollsters don't catch. Because turnout is hard. Asking who you're going to vote for, it's a yes or no question. And a lot of pollsters try to match turnout by going back to previous elections. She doesn't do that. She's caught a change in turnout, which means that she is showing something different to other pollsters that has the Democrats hopeful and the Republicans probably worried.
Robert, thanks for taking us through all of that. A quick pointer, because you can watch the live coverage of those results here on BBC News and on BBC One. It is also on the iPlayer in the UK at 22:40 GMT on Tuesday. Sumi Somaskanda and Katrina Perry will bring you a special programme from Washington with our team of experts and correspondents. So that will take you through a fascinating night of those early election results. I'm back with more here on the programme in a moment or two. Don't go away.